I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and joining us now from the great state of New York is constitutional law professor and gubernatorial candidate Zephyr Teachout. Zephyr, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be on the show.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. And listen, life has been interesting for you lately. You originally were a candidate for the nomination of the Working Families Party. We've had those folks on. We're supporters of what they do. We know you are too, and it looked like you might get that nomination as a third-party candidate until Governor Andrew Cuomo, the incumbent, managed to get a deal brokered by Bill de Blasio. He worked something out. He got that nomination, and now you are challenging Andrew Cuomo for the Democratic nomination for governor, and there have been a couple developments this week. So first of all, I wanted to start by asking you, before we get to those developments, how do you feel the campaign is going? I know you've got an uphill fight in terms of name recognition and that kind of thing, but how are things going?
Oh, it's going incredibly well. And just to be clear, when I entered the Working Families Party nomination, I was already planning to challenge Governor Cuomo in the Democratic primary. I'm a Democrat. I support the Working Families Party, but I'm a Democrat, and I think, in so many ways in a Democratic state like New York, we have a governor who calls himself a Democrat but is governed as a Republican. And so I entered the race because, I bring pretty traditional Democratic policies and values like fully funded education and infrastructure. I joined the race with my lieutenant governor candidate, Tim Wu, now 5.5 weeks ago, I guess, and it has been going extremely well. In our first month, we actually had more people contribute to my campaign than contributed to Andrew Cuomo's campaign in the prior 6 months. Now, having said that, he had a lot more corporate contributors, and his contributors tend to give $120,000, and mine tend to give $100,000. But it shows that there's relatively little deep support for him. People like his name. I supported him 4 years ago. I loved his father. But there isn't a lot of genuine enthusiasm, and New York is suffering right now. Whereas there is genuine enthusiasm for our campaign, and we're having just gotten off the ground. It's gotten off to a great start.
Well, those of us who follow either politics or Wall Street, and I consider myself in that group, have been aware of Governor Cuomo's shenanigans for a long time, whether it's standing up for Wall Street or shooting down actually Bill de Blasio's tax on the wealthy for education and spreading that cost among the rest of the population in the middle class instead. So some of us have had our eye on Governor Cuomo for a long time, but
yes, you have.
Yes. What's interesting to me is he may have his eye on you now, because there was an interesting story about some demonstrators protesting you who appeared to all be young people coming from one of his major corporate backers.
Yes. Yeah, I've had two press conferences in recent days, and at both ones there were a handful of a bunch of kids with signs. I didn't think much of it. I just assumed that they were Cuomo interns or something. But there was a great story yesterday, or just this morning, of some reporters followed them, and they ended up going back to one of his big real estate backers. In fact, one of the top 25 donors to Andrew Cuomo's campaign. So it's, I certainly never have, anybody who knows me knows I love politics, and I have no problem with controversial views, but it just epitomizes, what's happening in New York Democratic politics, is that here we have a big real estate basically being the force behind a Democratic governor in a state where rent is too high, property taxes are choking so many families, and instead we have developers' interests being served.
Well, that is a valid point, and I have to say, Zephyr, that for a long time I thought, well, I know Zephyr. I think she's great. I love that she's running against Cuomo. I have my issues with Cuomo, but she doesn't have a chance. And as much as I like her, but I gotta say, I wonder if things are changing, because, and I'm thinking specifically, you can imagine, of the Moreland Commission and the fact that your opponent, Governor Cuomo, ran on an anti-corruption ticket, appointed an anti-corruption commission and then first interfered with that commission, according to reports, when it began investigating his own backers, and then disbanded it altogether when things were getting uncomfortable. Now there's there's hot reporting on it, and an editorial in the Times today. Do you think this could shift the race?
Yes, of course it could. It's a real scandal in New York. Jon Stewart covered it last night. The New York Times devoted 3 of its best journalists, and I think they also had some help. William Rochbaum, Sue Craig, and Thomas Kaplan did a 7,000-word piece going into great detail about how Andrew Cuomo's top aide, Larry Schwartz, was blocking investigations into Andrew Cuomo's closest business associates. So this is a basic violation of trust. And you have to remember, Eliot Spitzer resigned after news came of personal indiscretions. This is suggesting that at least his top aide, and we don't yet know what Andrew Cuomo knew, how involved he was, what he directed. He has been silent for the two days since the report came out. He's canceled events. We don't yet know what he knew. We don't know how involved he was, but we do know at the very top of his administration, there are those who are acting as if you're close to Andrew Cuomo, you're above the law, and a different set of rules apply to you. And you don't get a much more basic violation of public trust than that. The race is what. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of Democrats don't engage in Democratic primaries because they, unless you have a 50% chance of winning, they say, why even bother? But the whole point of primaries is to have a real wide open debate about policy and to actually say, well, what do the people of the state want? What do Democrats want? And I have complete confidence, if we're just talking about policy, that the more people who know about me, the more they say, yes, that's the kind of New York I want. I want a New York where we actually fund our schools. I want a New York where we actually invest in public transportation instead of let it crumble. But this news, this scandal, is not going away anytime soon. And, I'm looking forward to winning the Democratic primary.
Now, one of the things I was planning to ask you a couple days ago when we arranged this was, what's your path to victory? I believe the primary date is September 9th, which is, 5-6 weeks away. Now, I'm just wondering, since you mentioned turnout, in fact, the turnout tends to be low in primaries, is that, because he's been very far ahead in the polls, and of course, scandal can change that, but the other thing is, what's your turnout strategy?
Well, we don't know whether it's going to be 500,000 or 700,000 who turn out. We do know we have a very active base. And as you know, if you follow politics, all politics happens in the last 2 weeks, especially in a race like this. That changes with a scandal like this. But most people aren't paying attention until the very end. And so those last few weeks are really essential. But we have some really strong bases in New York. One strong base is teachers and parents who see how Governor Cuomo has been not only not an education governor, but an anti-education governor. He's taken money from, he started his governorship proposing one of the largest cuts to education funding in state history, so he could pay for tax breaks for the big banks. That is not popular. His active, just distrust of teachers is not popular. He likes blaming teachers for failing schools, treating teachers like they're the reason that kids aren't getting what they need, when in fact it's pretty basic. You have to have small class sizes, you have to have guidance counselors, you have to have the resources that schools need. So one core base is teachers and parents. Sorry, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that pretty much a sort of corporate Democrats' orthodoxy to blame teachers for schools instead of giving them the support and the resources they need? Isn't he kind of coming off that, what is inaccurately sometimes called centrist playbook when he attacks?
There's nothing centrist about it, as you rightly point out. It's a pretty radical shift in the Democratic Party, and most of it's happened in the last 6 years. There were seeds of it before. So after the crash of 2008, the Democratic Party has really split. And one part of it veered far right, and the other part is returning to its roots, towards to FDR, traditional democratic values, and we're part of that traditional democratic core. But you're right that what we see happening with Andrew Cuomo isn't just about Andrew Cuomo. It's about a whole range of Democrats who, with a few socially progressive policies, think they can still claim the Democratic mantle when they're leaving behind middle-class families, working-class families, poor people, the basic elements of a strong social safety net. So just to return to your question about strategy, we have teachers and parents who are on fire for this campaign. We collected over 45,000 signatures, and a lot of that was from teachers and parents volunteering to carry the petitions. Another part of our core base strategy is we're sometimes called the fractivists, the anti-frackers. New York is one of the last, if not the last, shale-rich state that has not allowed hydrofracking. It's in a position to really lead ban fracking and move forward with a strong renewable energy platform. And plans are actually there for what New York would look like with a wind, water, solar plan. And it's something I support. It's called the Solutions Project. I think it's fantastic. And there's an extremely strong base of people who see what's happened with hydrofracking in other states, how dangerous it is, and are really, again, also on fire for this campaign. So right now, the leadership's very excited and engaged, and I've talked to a lot of fractivists. And as we move towards the primary, it's getting the broader base engaged and understanding that they have one option. They have a Governor Andrew Cuomo who's taken over $1 million from pro-fracking interests and refuses to, after years of study, say whether he thinks he's going to frack, which makes many of us suspect that he's pro-hydrofracking, or they have somebody who has a very clear and open position on our environmental future. So those are two bases. The third is the base of the millions of immigrants and immigrant rights activists in the state. Governor Cuomo chose as his running mate Kathy Hochul, who has not only run on the conservative line, but she's built her political career being anti-immigrant, which is not popular. The more people learn about her, the less they are excited about her representing democratic values. And so we have a powerful base in the immigrants and immigrant rights communities.
Now, I'm from upstate New York. I'm from Utica originally, and I know you got the endorsement of
from
Buffalo.
The handshake city, is that right?
There you go, and Utica Club, and
yes.
You got the endorsement of a city even further upstate, the teachers in Buffalo. Utica is a big immigrant community. So, a lot of what a lot of people don't realize when they think about New York politics is that upstate is a big deal. And and you've been spending any time upstate in my old homeland?
I haven't been to Utica, although I was just on Utica radio yesterday morning. But I've been to Buffalo a couple times. And we're basically going upstate once every week. We already have been, and we're going even more now. So it's it's one New York, as Elliot Spitzer used to say. It's if we see downstate and upstate as two different states, then both are diminished. One of our plans for New York is real investment in transportation economy. We have one of the largest transportation economies in the world, and yet it's a sort of embarrassment for a city and state of this stature to have the weak public transportation we do. So we have a vision of a 21st century, making New York State the hub of 21st century transportation. And that's going to bring jobs to upstate and jobs to downstate. So I think of them as the more connected we can see the state, the more powerful we all are.
Well, there are going to be people listening to this program from around the country who might want to help or find out more. Where can they go to do that?
Oh, yes, I've been remiss.
No, I'm here to encourage you.
No, I mean, the truth is, let's put a finer point on it. I don't have $35 billion like Governor Andrew Cuomo. There's a reason he has $35 billion. The reason is he serves the interests of those who can make large campaign donations of over $100,000. There are basically no campaign finance laws in New York. And it's not just if you want to, but we rely on you. Like, this is an important campaign for the soul of the Democratic Party in the heart of democratic country. And we rely on people from around the state and around the country to get engaged. So they can go to my website, zephyrteachout.com, or, follow me on Twitter, Zephyr Teachout. I got this name like my millstone around my neck, but I'm carrying it wherever I go. So if you can spell it, you can follow us. ZephyRTeachout.
Well, look, my name's Eskow, so that's not so great either. And by the way, both of themselves lend to stupid puns, which
they do.
So listen, what? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, what were you going to?
Besides following us, the thing that is most important is everybody who learns about us, not everybody, but when people learn about us, there's extraordinary excitement. There's a real Democratic alternative to this Democrat in name only in New York, and to this, governor with a scandal very close at his heels. So our biggest challenge is just getting known about, getting people to know that there's a female law professor who has a long history of organizing and political engagement, who's running against Cuomo. That alone, and you get this sense of excitement, like we can have a better New York. So wherever you are in the country, if you let your media organization know, or national media organization know, we're more likely to get heard.
Well, look, let's do this anyway. Since you mentioned a long period and a long history of political organizing, I think I first became aware of you when you were involved with the Howard Dean campaign, and then we wrote for the same ill-fated political website. But I mean, you go back at least 10 years in the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, as we say, right? I mean, I'm probably leaving out a lot of stuff.
No, that's right. I spent my early career as a death penalty lawyer, but really for the last 11 years, I've been more involved in taking on big money in banking and big money in politics, and helped found Break Up the Banks group after the crash. I was the national director of the Sunlight Foundation, which is a big anti-corruption group. And then, a central part of our economy right now, of course, is the internet, which a lot of politicians still seems like they're in 1996, and I think of it as an add-on. And I've also been involved with Fight for the Future and other organizations that have led the fight against SOPA and PIPA and led the fight for net neutrality. Tim and I are fighting to stop the Comcast-Time Warner merger, for instance, in New York State, which many people don't realize this, but states have the power to have their own policy, their own antitrust policy. And right now the Public Service Commission in New York is considering whether or not to block the Time Warner Comcast merger. So I've been very involved in that as well.
So can I just engage the law professor for a second? I think, which is in one sense inseparable from the candidate, but I look at astonishment and our government's unwillingness, it seems to me, but correct me if I'm wrong, to enforce the basic antitrust principles that were in place for a century in this country. It seems to me astonishing that we could even be contemplating something like the Comcast merger.
Yes, that's right. No, it's one of the great tragedies of the last, let's see, since 81, that's 91, to help me count, 33 years?
23 years, yeah. 33 years, excuse me. I'm not doing any better. 33 years, yeah.
So in 1981, Ronald Reagan rewrote the antitrust guidelines. And in doing so, he wrote political law, he rewrote business law, he rewrote the foundation of really the most vibrant time in American economic history. He wrote out all considerations in antitrust except efficiency. So antitrust traditionally, going back to before it was called antitrust, when Jefferson wanted an anti-monopoly clause in the Constitution, antitrust has always been a principle that favors innovation, that favors resiliency, that favors democracy. And according to Ronald Reagan, antitrust stands for one thing, which is efficiency. That's it. And bigger is more efficient. In other words, there are no antitrust laws. Right. So the great tragedy, though, is that Democrats have been complicit in forgetting that we have this power. And one of the things that Tim and I are bringing back, besides this genuine resistance to the corporate Democrat and the corruption is we have this positive vision, and part of the positive vision is reviving the antitrust of Teddy Roosevelt, of FDR, of Madison, of the abolitionists, all of whom understood that monopolies are a great, great threat to democracy. And this Comcast merger is example A of why it's a threat. It's bad for workers. It's bad for people at home. It's bad for small businesses who can't afford their cable bills. And it's terrible for democracy because it means that one, big company controls what we see, what we hear, and what political information we learn. Try going on MSNBC to talk about Comcast or Time Warner. No, it's a major problem when Democrats can't talk about core democratic issues because it's controlled by a particular business interest.
Yeah, I didn't mean to laugh because I take it lightly, but because it's so profound a problem. And I would argue, you're as you know from all your internet work, that when a Comcast corporation becomes monolithic and monopolistic, then in given markets, then it even affects what people's searchability, people's online ability, people's access to entertainment. You name it. It's almost like a kind of panopticon control that
well, there's a simple way to think about it. Like you and I talk about antitrust and monopoly, and we've been talking about it since we met. but for most people, it's just about power. It's about too much centralized power. That's a basic democratic principle. That doesn't mean sometimes people confuse power and government. Government works when it's accountable, because then people actually retain power in the government. And the problem is when you have any company that takes up too much power.
Right. And I think that's really important for people to understand. But Zephyr, Zephyr Teachout, it's not just a democratic principle. I mean, I think there is what used to be a Republican principle.
D, yes.
Yes, but in addition to that, there is a core conservative principle called competition.
Yes, yeah. No, well, I believe in competition because I'm in a primary that was not supposed to be competitive, and I think competition is the core of democracy, and it's the core of a strong economy, too.
So you have a vision of how you would take the government. If the governor of New York decides to enforce antitrust law, that could certainly have profound national ramifications. Meanwhile, your candidate your opponent rather is now facing the fact that as of this morning or as of today, the U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara says that he's going to take over the anti-corruption work that Governor Cuomo shut down when he disbanded the Moreland Commission in April. So this is going to be an interesting month. Zephyr Teachout, good luck, the best of luck with your campaign. And if people want to know more, they can go to Zephyr, Zephyr, Teachout.com. And thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, I was thrilled to be on the show. It's great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you, too. Thanks again. That's Zephyr Teachout, constitutional law professor, candidate for governor. We'll be right back after this. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.